OCBC just reported its first quarter 2026 results. And honestly, this quarter tells us something very important about the future of Singapore banks. Because for the first time in years, higher interest rates are no longer the main driver of profits. Instead, wealth management, insurance, and fee income are becoming the real engine of growth. But here's the big question investors must ask now. At $21.88, is OCBC still undervalued? Or has the market already priced in all the good news? And more importantly, is the dividend still sustainable if the Fed starts cutting rates? Today we'll break down OCBC's latest financials, dividend yield, whether the stock is overvalued or undervalued, risks from Fed rate cuts, and whether OCBC's Indonesia acquisition could become a long-term growth engine. And as always, this video is for educational and informational purposes only, and is not financial advice or a recommendation to buy or sell any security. All financial information presented was obtained from publicly available sources, including SGX announcements and company materials as of 8th of May 2026. Please remember, share prices can fall, dividends are never guaranteed, and past performance does not guarantee future results. Please do your own due diligence and consider your own financial situation, objectives, and risk tolerance before making any investment decisions. Chapter 1. OCBC's First Quarter, 2026. Results and the real story behind the numbers. First, the headline numbers were actually very solid. OCBC reported 1.97 billion Singapore dollars net profit for the first quarter of 2026. That's a 5% increase year-on-year, and up 13% quarter-on-quarter. Honestly, that's impressive, because the operating environment is becoming more challenging for banks. Why? Because benchmark interest rates are cooling, and the market is increasingly pricing in future Fed rate cuts. In fact, OCBC's net interest margin, or NIM, fell sharply, from 2.04% to 1.76%. That's a meaningful decline. So, how did OCBC still grow profits? Simple. Wealth management and non-interest income came in very strong. Wealth management fees surged 34% to 422 million Singapore dollars. And non-interest income hit a record 1.61 billion Singapore dollars. Most importantly, wealth management now contributes around 39% of OCBC's total income. And honestly, that may be the real story of this quarter. Because this quarter was not really about lending. The real story is wealth management. Banking wealth AUM reached 342 billion Singapore dollars. Think about that for a moment. Nearly 40% of OCBC's income is now tied to wealth management, insurance, and fee income instead of purely lending spreads. That's a huge structural change. Why does this matter? Because wealth businesses are generally capital light, fee-generating, recurring, and usually more stable over the long term. And honestly, this may gradually make OCBC less dependent purely on interest rate cycles. This is also why OCBC is aggressively expanding into Indonesia. Recently, OCBC announced it will acquire parts of HSBC Indonesia's wealth and retail banking business. The acquisition adds 6.6 billion Singapore dollars AUM, 336,000 customers, and 1,300 staff. And strategically, I think this is a very important move, because Indonesia may become one of ASEAN's biggest long-term wealth growth markets. Young population, growing middle class, rising affluence. OCBC is clearly positioning itself early to capture that long-term ASEAN wealth growth story. Chapter 2. Is OCBC overvalued or undervalued? Now let's talk valuation. As of 7th of May 2026, OCBC closed at $21.88. At this price, OCBC's market cap is around 100 billion Singapore dollars. That firmly places it among the largest banking franchises in ASEAN. OCBC is trading around 12.4 to 12.5 times earnings. Historically, Singapore banks often traded closer to 9 to 11 times earnings. So today, OCBC is no longer trading at a cheap bank valuation. OCBC is trading around 1.58 times book value. Historically, OCBC was often viewed as the value Singapore bank when it traded closer to 1 to 1.2 times price to book. So clearly, the market is now assigning a premium valuation. But honestly, there are reasons for that premium. Because today's OCBC is very different from the OCBC of 5 to 10 years ago. Investors are increasingly pricing in stronger wealth management growth, more diversified earnings, insurance contribution, resilient 13% return on equity, and fortress-level capital with CET1 at around 17%. And don't forget, OCBC is also returning substantial capital to shareholders through its 2.5 billion Singapore dollars capital return plan by fiscal year 2026. When a bank commits to returning that much cash back to shareholders, the market rarely lets the stock stay cheap for long. So my overall view? At $21.88, OCBC looks more fairly valued to slightly expensive, rather than deeply undervalued. But at the same time, this is no longer just a traditional lending bank. The market is increasingly valuing OCBC more like a regional wealth, insurance, and banking platform. Chapter 3. Dividend yield and is it sustainable? Now let's talk about what, honestly, many Singapore investors care about most: dividends. For financial year 2025, OCBC paid 41 cents as an interim dividend, 42 cents as a final dividend, and on top of that, a 16-cent special dividend or capital return. So that gives us a total dividend of 99 cents. At $21.88, that works out to a total trailing dividend yield of around 4.5%. But here's the important nuance. Part of this yield actually comes from temporary capital returns. If we exclude the 16-cent special dividend, the ordinary recurring dividend becomes 83 cents, which means the core ordinary dividend yield is around 3.8%. And to be honest, I think this distinction is very important for long-term income investors. Because while the 4.5% yield looks attractive, investors should not automatically assume that all of it is permanent recurring income. Now the good news is, the ordinary dividend itself still looks very sustainable. Why? Well, CET1 capital remains extremely strong at around 17%. The payout ratio remains disciplined at around 50%. The NPL ratio is only 0.9%. And earnings are increasingly diversified through wealth management and insurance. That combination gives OCBC a very strong dividend foundation, even if interest rates soften further. Now, regarding the 16-cent special dividend, management has already indicated that the $2.5 billion capital return program is expected to complete by financial year 2026. So realistically, investors should treat the special dividend as a bonus, not a guaranteed permanent payout. That said, OCBC's capital position is still extremely strong. So while future special dividends are never guaranteed, the bank may still have flexibility over time to increase the base dividend, launch future capital return plans, or continue rewarding shareholders if earnings and capital remain healthy. But as conservative dividend investors, it's usually safer to focus first on the ordinary recurring dividend. And based on today's numbers, I think a long-term sustainable yield expectation of around 3.5 to 4% is probably the more realistic way to look at OCBC going forward. Chapter 4. Fed rate cuts, risk or opportunity? Now here's the big macro question. What happens if the Fed cuts rates further? For OCBC, this is probably the single biggest variable investors need to watch going forward. Why? Because lower benchmark rates directly pressure net interest margins. And we already saw that happening this quarter. OCBC's NIM fell from 2.04% to 1.76%. So if the Fed cuts more aggressively than expected, bank lending margins could compress further. That may slow earnings growth, moderate dividend growth, and put pressure on bank valuations. But here's where OCBC's story becomes more interesting. Unlike the past, OCBC today is no longer relying purely on lending income. Remember, non-interest income now contributes around 42% of total income. And honestly, that diversification may become increasingly important if rates continue to soften. Why? Because lower rates don't only create risks. They can also boost stock markets, improve investment sentiment, increase demand for investment products, and drive more wealth management activity. In other words, lower rates may hurt lending income, but potentially help fee income. And this is probably the key strategic shift investors should understand. OCBC is gradually building a more balanced earnings model, where wealth management, insurance, treasury income, and traditional banking can help offset each other across different interest rate cycles. In fact, management's current 2026 outlook already assumes one Fed rate cut in the fourth quarter of 2026. So if rate cuts become deeper or more aggressive than expected, the shift toward wealth management may no longer just be a growth opportunity. It may become a necessity to keep earnings resilient. And honestly, this quarter may be one of the clearest signs yet that OCBC is actively preparing for that future. Chapter 5. Risks and Future Prospects. Now, despite the strong results, investors still need to understand the risks. And honestly, the biggest risk remains falling interest rates. If benchmark rates fall more aggressively than expected, NIM pressure may worsen further, and that could slow earnings growth, moderate dividend growth, and pressure valuations. At the same time, OCBC is also watching rising geopolitical risks closely. Management specifically highlighted concerns around oil prices, energy supply, and macroeconomic uncertainty linked to the Middle East situation. In fact, OCBC increased precautionary overlays significantly this quarter. That tells us management is becoming more cautious about the global outlook. Now, another key risk is execution risk in Indonesia. The HSBC Indonesia acquisition sounds strategically attractive, but integration is never easy, especially in wealth management. Because if relationship managers leave, sometimes clients leave too. And investors should also remember OCBC still has meaningful Greater China exposure. So if China's economy weakens further, that may affect credit quality and growth momentum. But despite all these risks, I still think OCBC's long-term prospects remain quite interesting. Why? Because the bank is gradually transforming itself into a regional ASEAN wealth platform. And honestly, that may become one of the strongest long-term banking themes in ASEAN, especially across Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Hong Kong wealth flows. The Indonesia acquisition in particular could become very important over the next 5 to 10 years, because compared to mature Singapore banking, Indonesia offers faster economic growth, younger demographics, and rising affluence. So long-term, I think the real story is no longer simply, can OCBC survive falling rates? Instead, the much bigger question becomes, can OCBC successfully build a diversified ASEAN wealth ecosystem? And honestly, if execution succeeds, that could potentially justify higher valuation multiples over time. Final takeaway. So here's the bottom line. At $21.88, OCBC no longer looks deeply undervalued. It probably looks fairly valued to slightly expensive. But this is still a very high-quality banking franchise. Why? Because asset quality remains strong with NPL at just 0.9%. Capital remains fortress level with CET1 around 17%. Wealth management is scaling rapidly, and earnings are becoming more diversified. And honestly, that diversification may become increasingly important in a world where interest rates are no longer the easy profit driver they were in recent years. Now on dividends, the ordinary recurring dividend yield of around 3.8% still looks relatively sustainable in my opinion. But investors should clearly understand the higher 4.5% trailing yield includes temporary capital returns. So for long-term planning, it's probably safer to anchor expectations closer to the ordinary recurring dividend first. And ultimately, I think the biggest story going forward is no longer simply, will Fed cuts hurt OCBC? Instead, the much bigger story may be whether OCBC can successfully evolve into a regional ASEAN wealth, insurance, and banking platform. Because if that transformation succeeds, the Indonesia expansion, wealth management growth, and broader ASEAN affluent trends could matter far more over the next decade than just 1 or 2 Fed rate cuts. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to Wealth for You, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future Singapore investing videos. And let me know in the comments, between DBS, UOB, and OCBC, which Singapore bank would you choose for long-term dividend investing? Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.